2 years after. They say the pond still hasn't been fixed.
There's a little stream that goes off the back down through the woods.
The water, the chemicals, the pollutants are running down toward Towanda to the Susquehanna. No one gets that.
The water still runs off the pad down into the pond every time it rains.
The Burnett's experience is one of a growing list of personal stories that are raising concerns about safety. There's what happened at Sherry Vargston's farm. She has an active gas well 500 feet from her house. After noticing sputtering in her faucet, tests revealed that her well water suddenly contained high levels of methane, natural gas. Explosively high levels.
How contaminated is the water? How severe is the contamination? With what? And what can we do to correct this?
This couple, the Johnsons, were told they had to quarantine 36 of their cattle because they had showed high levels of radioactive strontium. The strontium had leaked out in the water from a gas company holding pond just behind their barn. Their cattle had lapped it up.
What do you pronounce that?
Strontium?
Strontium, which was deadly for the cows because it goes in and hits their bones.
Tales like these of poisoned animals and flaming faucets have sparked heated debates about hydraulic fracking. Here's how it works. Fracking begins with drilling a vertical well that passes through the aquifer. It continues down for a mile or more, till it nears the vast shale deposit that runs beneath nearly all of Pennsylvania, the Marcellus Shale, the second largest natural gas deposit in the world. At the shale level, the drill moves horizontally for up to a mile. A perforating gun is lowered to the end and fired, opening microscopic cracks in the shale. Then, up to several million gallons of water, sand, and specialized fracking chemicals are forced down the pipe at extremely high pressures, opening still more fractures. Finally, methane gas trapped in the shale is released and travels up to the surface. Pennsylvania is at the epicenter of gas fracking. From 27 wells in 2007, the count has jumped up to nearly 1,500 by 2010.
So while the farmers in the My Range Resources TV ad seemed very positive about what happens with natural gas drilling on their land, here are 3 different stories of farmers in Pennsylvania and their experiences. So now take a minute in your handout for source number 3 and look at that in terms of the accuracy and relevance, in terms of authority or purpose. Is this a source that you think would be important to include in your paper, and why? Okay, here's a 4th source that I'd like you to look at in terms of authority, purpose, point of view, and currency. This is from a website called Energy Tomorrow, and there's an article by Jane Van Ryan who addresses those hydraulic fracturing issues one by one. So we saw a video with people talking about the impacts of their farms and the drinking water, and so in this blog, this writer takes a look at each one of the challenges that people are putting up against fracking, and seems to address those. And I'd like you to look at those look at the website in terms of those criteria and see what you come up with. Is this a site that you would use in your paper? So if you actually go to this website and you look at what Jane Van Ryan writes about, you'll see that she sort of builds an argument for hydraulic fracturing, and looks at studies from the EPA in 2004 saying that we haven't seen no contamination of underground drinking water. But think about the date of those videos that we saw were later than 2004. So she seems to do, and she quotes some things from 1998. And she comes down here and then talks about the benefits of hydraulic fracturing. And so I think some of the evidence in the video from the farmers was pretty compelling, so I asked myself, why would this person then be building such a strong argument in the other direction? And so I want to know a little bit more about who the author is and what this blog is. So she was a former senior communications manager and new media advisor of the American Petroleum Institute. So perhaps if you look at the purpose or reason that this blog exists, she's working for the oil companies. And so perhaps is there some bias, and are they using tricks to make this look like it's okay, and that in fact they look like they have evidence from the EPA itself from 2004 to show that that it's absolutely safe. But because we know who she is, I am actually going to question that a little bit, especially this 2004 EPA study. And who this website is written by the American Petroleum Institute. So they advocate for the petroleum industry to the public. So any industry is not going to say, oh, well, we have big problems and this is problematic and we're poisoning your drinking water, right? So, how are you going to decide whether you or not you want to use this website? So go back to your handout and make sure you fill in, would you use this or wouldn't you, and what are the reasons why? And then, a little detective work pays off. So our fifth source is at the EPA itself, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, which is one of the agencies of the United States government to regulate what happens in the environment to make sure that the citizens are safe. And so indeed they did have something written in 2004, but at the time that Jane Ryan wrote that last article, actually they had a new study out that she does not quote in 2010 with further information about the potential impact of fracturing on drinking water, and that there are significant questions that need to be researched going forward. So if you, again, look at source number 5, the EPA, and you look at those 5 criteria in terms of authority and accuracy and the purpose that the EPA exists is to inform United States citizens, what conclusions would you come to? Would you feel that the EPA would be a good resource for writing your paper? Go ahead and fill that in on your handout. And so the last one that we'll look at actually came about. There was a link in the EPA report to this article from Nature, the International Weekly Journal of Science, about fracking contamination in Wyoming groundwater. So here was the first EPA test case where they were really looking into and measuring whether now fracking causes or can be behind contamination. And so it had their first case study. And so if you look at this last source and you go out to the website, I want you to fill in on your handout by looking at the author and the article itself and the journal in which it appears. Do you feel that according to the CRAP test criteria that this is a resource you could use or not in your paper? And so if I look at and I click on the author's name, he came to Nature from the Congressional Quarterly, where he covered energy, climate, and the environment for 2 years. Before that, he was a Knight Fellow in Science Journalism at MIT, one of the premier universities in the United States, and he was a science reporter for the Santa Fe, New Mexican, where he covered Los Alamos and the National Lab. So he's certainly qualified to write this article. And so if you poked around at this journal, you'd find it's also a very good weekly journal of science, and that it's very reputable. So how would you talk about whether you could use this or not? And so you will see that, again, that there are some things that are pointing to the fact that hydraulic fracturing have indeed contaminated groundwater that we use in our drinking supply. But in order to, be able to make any kind of claim, I want you to go back now and think about our resources. So we started with this description of fracking that we got from the engineering website, and then we looked at some videos from a actual oil company saying, yes, everything's safe. We looked at some real farmers who were showing you the effects through the burning water coming out of their tap and the poisoned cattle, and the folks who had the contaminated pond water. And then again, on the other side, you have an energy blog where someone's saying, no, there's no problem with fracking, and in fact, the EPA has its own study that says there's no problem with fracking. But we look, and in fact, there is a follow-up study that was available at the time. This person wrote this blog showing that, that there is need for more study. And then finally, the science article from Nature talking about the first possible link in Pavilion, Wyoming of contaminated water that they can link directly back to fracturing. So, I want you to decide, can we make any claims yet? Can we say at this point that fracturing can contaminate the drinking water supply or not, and what are the sources that back up your claim? So you either can, and I'm going to use these sources, they're reputable because, or we can't make that claim yet, and this is why. So I want you to do that on your handout.